Captain Lee Minho pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation window. Outside in the darkness of space, tiny stars sparkled like distant campfires. But his attention focused on something much closer, a strange ship moving toward them. The alien vessel looked nothing like the human ships Minho knew. Its surface seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that caught the starlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. The ship moved without any visible engines, gliding through space like a fish swimming through water. "Are you ready?" Minho asked his team without turning around. Behind him, Dr. Park Ji-woo fumbled with her medical scanner. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to adjust the settings. She was the team's expert on alien life, but this would be her first time actually meeting one face to face. "I think so," she said quietly. "The equipment is working fine." Engineer Kim Tae-jun sat at a nearby console, checking his recording devices one more time. Everything had to be documented perfectly. This meeting would change human history forever. "Remember what we practiced," Minho said, finally turning to face his small team. "These aliens are telepaths. They can read minds. But they say it's perfectly safe. They've done this ceremony with hundreds of other species." The three humans had spent weeks preparing for this moment. 6 months ago, the Zephyrians had sent their first message to Earth. It was simple and direct. They wanted to welcome humanity into their galactic empire. They promised peace, trade, and protection. All Earth had to do was complete one small ceremony. The Mind Touch, they called it. A simple meeting of minds between species to build trust and understanding. The Zephyrians explained that they were master diplomats. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to truly understand other beings, to know their intentions and desires. This made them perfect mediators and peacekeepers across the galaxy. A soft chime echoed through the human ship. "They're requesting permission to dock," Kim announced. "Let them come aboard," Minho ordered. The docking process took only a few minutes. The alien ship attached itself to the human vessel with a technology that seemed almost like magic. No mechanical arms or clamps, the two ships simply flowed together as if they were meant to be one. Minho straightened his uniform and walked toward the airlock. His team followed close behind. Through the reinforced window of the airlock door, they could see movement on the other side. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Ambassador Valkyrie stepped through, and the humans got their first close look at an alien being. The Zephyrian stood nearly 7 feet tall, with long thin limbs that moved with impossible grace. Its skin had a silver color that seemed to shift and change in the light, like the surface of calm water. Two large, pale eyes dominated a face that was almost human but not quite. "Welcome aboard our ship," Minho said, trying to keep his voice steady. The universal translator device on his belt hummed as it converted his words. "The honor is ours, Captain," came Valkyrie's reply through the translator. The alien's real voice sounded like wind chimes, musical and strange. "We have traveled far to meet your species. We are most curious about humanity." "We're curious about you too," Dr. Park said, stepping forward. She held her medical scanner, ready to take readings if the alien agreed. "Of course," Valkyrie said, noticing the device. "Please scan as much as you wish. We have nothing to hide from our new friends." The alien stood patiently as Park ran her scanner over its body. The readings showed a biology completely different from anything on Earth, but clearly very advanced and healthy. "Fascinating," Park whispered, studying the data. "Now," Valkyrie said, "shall we proceed with the Mind Touch ceremony? It is a simple process. I will place my hands upon your head and briefly connect our minds. This allows me to understand your intentions and for you to see that we mean you no harm." Minho nodded. They had discussed this moment many times. Dr. Park had volunteered to be the human representative for the ceremony. She was the most knowledgeable about alien biology and the most mentally prepared for the experience. "Dr. Park will represent humanity," Minho announced. "Excellent," Valkyrie said, moving gracefully toward the human scientist. "Please do not be afraid. I have performed this ceremony thousands of times with many different species. It is as natural to me as breathing is to you." Park took a deep breath and stood very still. She had read everything available about telepathic contact, though most of it was just theory and guesswork. No human had ever actually experienced it before. "Just relax your mind," Valkyrie instructed, raising its long, slender hands. "Think of something peaceful. Let your thoughts flow naturally." The alien's fingers began to glow with a soft, blue light. Tiny patterns of bioluminescence danced across its skin like living tattoos. This was clearly some kind of evolved telepathic organ, developed over millions of years of evolution. "I will touch your temples now," Valkyrie said softly. The connection will last only a few seconds. Park closed her eyes and tried to think of her childhood home, of her parents' garden in spring, of anything calm and pleasant. Around her, Minho and Kim watched in tense silence. This was the moment that would either bring humanity into a vast galactic community or end in disaster. The alien's glowing fingers moved closer to Park's head, ready to make contact and bridge the gap between two completely different forms of consciousness. Valkyrie moved forward with the smooth confidence of someone who had done this many times before. The alien's long fingers stretched out toward Dr. Park's head, and she could see the strange blue light growing brighter under its silver skin. The patterns looked like tiny lightning bolts dancing just beneath the surface. "This is perfectly normal," Valkyrie said in its musical voice. "I have touched the minds of creatures from 100 different worlds. Some think in colors, others in mathematics, some in pure emotion. Each species is unique, but all are beautiful in their own way." Park tried to stay calm. She focused on her breathing in and out just like they had practiced. Around her, she could hear the quiet hum of Kim's recording equipment and the soft sound of Captain Minho's footsteps as he moved closer to watch. "Ready?" Valkyrie asked. Park nodded. "Ready." The alien's glowing fingertips came closer. Park could feel a strange tingling in the air like the feeling before a thunderstorm. The bioluminescent patterns on Valkyrie's hands pulsed faster, brighter. "Just let your mind be open," the alien whispered. "Think of nothing or think of everything. It does not matter." The fingers touched Park's temples. For exactly 1 second, nothing happened. Park felt only the cool touch of alien skin against her own. She began to relax, thinking that maybe this would be easier than expected. Then Valkyrie's entire body went rigid. The alien's pale eyes suddenly opened very wide, wider than seemed possible. The pupils shrank to tiny points. For a moment, Valkyrie stood completely still like a statue. Then the screaming began. The sound that came from the alien was unlike anything the humans had ever heard. It was high and sharp like the sound of metal being torn apart, but with an awful musical quality that made their teeth ache. The scream went on, echoing off the walls of the ship's corridors. Valkyrie's hands flew away from Park's head as if burned. The alien's whole body began to shake violently, arms and legs jerking in all directions. The bioluminescent patterns under its skin flashed wildly, strobing like broken lights. "What's happening?" Park shouted over the terrible noise. But Valkyrie could not answer. The alien's eyes had rolled back until only the whites showed. Its mouth hung open, and that horrible shriek continued to pour out. The ambassador's legs gave out and it collapsed to the metal floor with a crash that shook the whole room. "Medical emergency." Captain Minho yelled into his communication device. "Medical team to docking Bay 7 immediately." The screaming stopped suddenly, leaving only silence that seemed even louder than the noise had been. Valkyrie lay motionless on the floor, not breathing. Park dropped to her knees beside the fallen alien. "I didn't do anything," she said desperately. "I just stood there. I thought peaceful thoughts like you said." Before anyone could respond, the air in the room began to shimmer. 3 more aliens materialized out of nothing, appearing as if they had walked through invisible doors. These were the Zephyrian guards and they did not look friendly. They were smaller than Valkyrie but moved with quick, dangerous grace. Each carried a weapon that glowed with the same blue light as their telepathic organs. The weapons pointed directly at the humans. "Step away from the ambassador," one guard commanded. Its translator crackled with static, making its voice sound angry and broken. "We didn't hurt anyone," Minho said, raising his hands to show they were empty. "Something went wrong with the ceremony." "Humans are dangerous," another guard hissed. "Look what you have done." Kim quickly pulled out his medical scanner and ran it over Valkyrie's still form. The readings made no sense. The alien's brain showed activity unlike anything in the scanner's database, chaotic patterns that seemed to have no order at all. More aliens appeared, the medical team this time. They moved with urgent purpose, surrounding their fallen ambassador. One of the medics placed its hands on Valkyrie's head, clearly trying to use telepathy to understand what had happened. The medic jerked its hands away almost immediately, looking shocked and frightened. "What is it?" one of the guards demanded. "The mind," the medic whispered, its voice shaking even through the translator. "I have never felt anything like it. The human's thoughts, they are chaos. Pure chaos. How does it function? How does it stay sane?" The medics worked frantically over Valkyrie, using devices that hummed and glowed. Slowly the ambassador's breathing returned to normal. The wild light patterns under its skin faded to a dim glow. Park looked down at her own hands. They looked perfectly normal: pale human skin, short fingernails, a small scar on one knuckle from a childhood accident. These hands had somehow done something terrible to an alien mind just by being touched. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "What's wrong with my thoughts? What's wrong with being human?" One of the guards kept its weapon trained on her while the others helped lift the unconscious ambassador. "You will remain here until we understand what kind of weapon you used," it said. "We don't have any weapons." Minho protested. This was supposed to be a peaceful meeting. But the aliens were not listening. They carried Valkyrie away, leaving only the three guards behind to watch the confused humans. Park sat back on her heels, staring at the spot where the alien had fallen. Whatever had just happened, it was clear that humanity was very different from what the Zephyrians had expected. And that difference might not be welcome in their galactic empire. Several hours later, in the medical section of the alien ship, Valkyrie's eyes slowly opened. The ambassador felt like someone who had been drowning in a storm and was just now reaching the surface. Every thought hurt. Every memory felt jumbled and wrong. The Zephyrian medical team stood around the bed, their pale faces filled with worry. Dr. Park sat in a chair nearby, still under guard but allowed to observe. Captain Minho and Engineer Kim waited by the door. "Water?" Valkyrie whispered. The alien's voice sounded rough and broken. A medic quickly brought a container of liquid that glowed faintly blue. Valkyrie drank slowly, each sip seeming to help clear the confusion. "What happened to me?" the ambassador asked. The head medic, whose name was Healer Zenth, spoke carefully. "You made telepathic contact with the human. But something went very wrong. Your mind was overwhelmed." "I remember," Valkyrie said, and immediately wished that wasn't true. The human's thoughts, they were like a hurricane. No, worse than that. Like being caught in a machine that was spinning in all directions at once. Dr. Park leaned forward in her chair. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I tried to think peaceful thoughts like you told me to." Valkyrie looked at her with something that might have been fear. "You were thinking peaceful thoughts. But you were also thinking about 50 other things at the same time. How is that possible?" "I don't understand," Park said. "What do you mean?" "When I touched your mind," Valkyrie explained slowly, "I experienced everything you were thinking in that moment. You were remembering your pet dog from when you were 7 years old. But at the same time, you were worried about whether this meeting would go well. And you were wondering what you would have for dinner tonight. And you felt sad because your friend had sent you a message yesterday about her sick mother." Park nodded. "Yes, I was thinking about all those things." "All at the same time?" Valkyrie's voice rose in amazement. "Well, yes. That's normal." "Normal." The alien tried to sit up but fell back against the pillows. "But that's not all. While you were thinking about your dog and dinner and your friend, you were also composing different responses to things I might say. I counted 17 different possible conversations you were planning in your head." 17. Kim spoke up from near the door. "You mean other species don't do that?" Healer Zenth answered for the ambassador. "No, Engineer Kim. Other species have organized minds. We think one thought at a time in order of importance. First we consider the most important thing, then the next most important, and so on." "That sounds boring," Kim said. "It is peaceful," Zenth replied. "Our thoughts flow like a calm river. Yours are like being trapped inside a tornado made of lightning." Valkyrie managed to sit up this time. "In just the few seconds I was connected to Dr. Park's mind, I experienced more mental activity than I normally have in an entire day. You were living in the present moment while simultaneously remembering dozens of past events and imagining multiple possible futures." "How do you stay sane?" another medic asked. "The chaos should have destroyed your mind long ago." Park looked at her human teammates, then back at the aliens. "I guess we're just used to it. We've always been this way." "But how do you make decisions?" Valkyrie asked. "With so many thoughts happening at once, how do you choose what to do?" "We just do," Minho said. "Sometimes we think about things logically. Sometimes we go with our feelings. Sometimes we just guess and hope for the best." "And you can hold contradictory beliefs?" Valkyrie continued, still amazed. "Dr. Park, in your mind I found that you both believe this meeting will be successful and worry that it will be a disaster. You hold both thoughts as true at the same time." "That's because both things could happen," Park explained. "I hope for the best but prepare for the worst." "Impossible," Healer Zenth whispered. "A mind cannot believe two opposite things simultaneously. It should cause immediate mental breakdown." "But it doesn't," Kim pointed out. "We're all fine." Valkyrie lay back and stared at the ceiling. "This changes everything we thought we knew about intelligence and consciousness. Your species doesn't just think differently, you think in a way that should be impossible. Are we some kind of monsters? Park asked quietly. No, Valkyrie said after a long pause. You are something much more significant. The chaos in your minds that terrifies us, it may also be your greatest strength. What do you mean? Minho asked. Other species think in straight lines. We solve problems by following logical steps from beginning to end. But your minds make connections that seem random but somehow work. You create art from your emotional chaos. You solve problems by jumping to conclusions that should be wrong but turn out to be right. The room fell silent as everyone considered this. There's something else, Valkyrie said finally. Something that frightens the council even more than your chaotic thoughts. Your mental patterns make you immune to telepathic control. Any species that tried to dominate your minds would be driven insane by the contact. Is that bad? Park asked. That depends, Valkyrie replied, on whether you are friend or enemy to the rest of the galaxy. Within hours of the incident, messages began flying across the galaxy faster than light itself. On the home world of the Zephyrians, emergency alarms rang out in the great crystal towers where the High Council met. Similar scenes played out on dozens of other worlds as the news spread from one telepathic species to another. The humans had no idea that their simple diplomatic meeting had caused such a stir. They sat quietly in a waiting room aboard the alien medical ship, drinking bitter alien tea and wondering if they would ever see Earth again. Ambassador Valkyrie had been in communication with the High Council for 3 hours. The humans could see the alien through a transparent wall, sitting very still with eyes closed while strange lights pulsed around its head. This was how the Zephyrians held long-distance conversations, pure thought transmitted across the vast emptiness of space. Finally, the lights faded and Valkyrie opened its eyes. The ambassador looked tired and worried as it walked slowly toward the waiting humans. Well? Captain Minho asked. What's the verdict? Are we going to be arrested? Sent home? Destroyed? Valkyrie sat down heavily in one of the specially designed alien chairs. None of those things, Captain. But the situation is more complicated than we originally thought. Dr. Park set down her cup of tea. Complicated how? The High Council has been meeting for hours, bringing in experts from across our empire. We now understand why your species has remained isolated for so long, even though you have had the technology for space travel for decades. We've only had that technology for a few years, Engineer Kim corrected. No, Valkyrie said, shaking its head. You have had the basic principles of faster-than-light travel figured out for much longer. But every time your scientists got close to a breakthrough, something went wrong. Projects were cancelled. Funding was cut. Key researchers changed careers. The humans looked at each other in confusion. What are you saying? Minho asked. Other species have been unconsciously avoiding contact with you. Every time a telepathic race sent explorers toward Earth, they turned back without knowing why. They would find excuses, equipment problems, more interesting targets elsewhere, budget issues. But the real reason was that human thought patterns are so chaotic that they cause discomfort to telepathic minds, even from a distance. Park felt a chill run down her spine. So we've been quarantined without knowing it? In a sense, yes. The galaxy has been unconsciously protecting itself from you. That's horrible, Kim said. You make us sound like some kind of disease. Valkyrie was quiet for a moment. I understand why you would feel that way. But you must understand, what seems normal to you is terrifying to us. In the brief moment I touched your mind, Dr. Park, I experienced more mental activity than I normally have in a week. It was overwhelming. But you said we weren't monsters, Park reminded the alien. You are not monsters, Valkyrie agreed. You are something far more important. The chaos we fear in your minds, it is also your greatest strength. How can chaos be a strength? Minho asked. Because chaos and creativity are linked. Where we see disorder, you see possibilities. Where we see contradictions that must be resolved, you see different options that can all be true at the same time. Your minds work in ways that allow you to solve problems that would stop us completely. The alien stood up and began to pace back and forth. For example, when faced with a difficult decision, we gather all available information, analyze it logically, and choose the best option. This process can take days or weeks for complex problems. That sounds reasonable, Kim said. But humans do something different. You gather some information, but then you also consider your emotions, your instincts, your random thoughts, and your wild guesses. Somehow, you combine all of this chaos into decisions that often work better than our logical methods. Park thought about this. I guess we do trust our gut feelings a lot. Your Gut feelings are actually your subconscious mind's processing thousands of tiny details that your conscious minds never notice. This gives you abilities that seem almost magical to other species. Minho leaned forward. What does this mean for the alliance between our species? Valkyrie stopped pacing. That is what the High Council has been discussing. You see, there is something we have not told you about the current state of the galaxy. We face a terrible threat. What kind of threat? Park asked. There is another telepathic species called the Dominators. They are not peaceful like us. They conquer other worlds by taking control of the minds of entire populations. They have been expanding across the galaxy for centuries, enslaving planet after planet. The humans felt a chill at these words. The Dominators are incredibly powerful, Valkyrie continued. They can overwhelm any mind they encounter, turning entire civilizations into slaves who serve them willingly. We have been fighting them for generations, but we are losing. How does this relate to us? Minho asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Against humans, the Dominator's most powerful weapon would be completely useless. Your chaotic thought patterns would be like static interference to them. They would not be able to penetrate or control human minds. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. You're saying we could fight them? Park asked. More than that, Valkyrie said. You might be the only species in the galaxy that can resist them. You are not just immune to telepathic control, you may be our only hope for freedom. The three humans looked at each other, realizing that their simple diplomatic mission had become something much bigger and more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. 3 days after the incident that changed everything, the human diplomatic ship looked nothing like it had before. What had once been a small, quiet vessel carrying 3 nervous humans was now the center of the most important gathering in galactic history. Ships from 17 different alien species floated in space around the human vessel. Each ship looked completely different. Some were made of living crystal like the Zephyrian vessels, others appeared to be grown rather than built, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy held together by invisible forces. Inside the main meeting room, holographic projectors showed the images of alien leaders from across the galaxy. None of them were physically present, of course. After what had happened to Ambassador Valkyrie, no telepathic species wanted to risk direct contact with human minds. Captain Minho stood at the head of the conference table, still amazed that he had somehow become the representative for all of humanity in galactic affairs. Dr. Park sat to his right, surrounded by scientific equipment and data tablets. Engineer Kim was at his left, recording everything for the historical archives. The largest hologram showed High Counselor Reshtak, the leader of the Zephyrian Empire. The alien appeared as a tall, elegant figure made of shifting light and shadow. When it spoke, its voice came through the translators as calm and musical. Captain Minho, Reshtak began, we have spent these 3 days in constant discussion with our greatest minds. We have reached a conclusion about humanity's place in the galaxy. Minho felt his stomach tighten with nervousness. And what have you decided? We propose something that has never existed before in galactic history, the High Counselor announced. Not absorption of your species into our empire as we originally planned. Instead, we offer a partnership between equals. The other alien representatives flickered in their holograms, showing agreement through various gestures and color changes. What kind of partnership? Minho asked carefully. Your species would serve as guardians of mental freedom, Reshtak explained. We would establish joint colonies on worlds along the border with Dominator space. Humans would live normal lives in these settlements, but your very presence would create safe zones that the Dominators cannot penetrate. Dr. Park leaned forward. You mean you want us to be living shields? Not just shields, said another alien leader, this one appearing as a cluster of floating geometric shapes. Your people would be full partners in these colonies. You would bring your technology, your culture, your unique ways of solving problems. In return, we would share our knowledge of the galaxy. Minho considered this carefully. What would happen to Earth? Would our people have to leave our home world? Not at all, Reshtak assured him. Earth would remain the human home world. But some of your people might choose to live in these joint colonies, creating bridges between human and alien cultures. Engineer Kim spoke up. How many humans would we need for these colonies? Surprisingly few, answered a third alien, whose image looked like a walking tree made of silver metal. We have discovered that even a small human settlement creates a mental noise that the Dominators cannot penetrate. A few hundred humans could protect a colony of millions. Dr. Park had been working closely with Zephyrian scientists during the 3-day discussion period. She had made discoveries that excited her more than anything in her scientific career. We've learned something incredible, Park announced to the gathering. Human mental chaos isn't actually random. It has patterns and structures that we never recognized before. The alien leaders leaned forward in their holograms, eager to hear more. Using brain scans and analysis techniques, Park continued, we've mapped how human thoughts work. The chaos that seems so frightening to telepathic species actually follows complex rules. It's structured chaos. What does that mean? Asked the tree-like alien. It means we might be able to teach other species how to create similar mental patterns, Kim said enthusiastically. Not enough to drive them insane, but enough to give them some protection against telepathic control. Mental exercises based on human thought patterns, Park added. Meditation techniques that could help non-human minds become more resistant to dominator influence. The alien leaders began talking excitedly among themselves in languages the translators couldn't handle. Finally, Reshtak restored order. This is beyond our greatest hopes, the High Counselor said. You could not only resist the dominators yourselves but teach others to resist them as well. Ambassador Valkyrie, who had been quietly observing from the side of the room, finally spoke. The alien still looked somewhat shaken from the telepathic contact days earlier, but had insisted on participating in the discussions. There is something I must say, Valkyrie announced. When I touched Dr. Park's mind, I experienced something I had never imagined possible. The room fell silent. The chaos was terrifying, yes. But it was also beautiful, the ambassador continued. I saw how human minds create art from emotional pain. I witnessed how you solve problems by making impossible leaps of logic that somehow work. I felt how you can hold hope and despair in your hearts at the same time without being destroyed by the contradiction. Valkyrie's holographic image seemed to glow brighter. It was magnificent. Terrifying but magnificent. Minho smiled for the first time in days. So we're not joining your empire. We're creating something completely new together. A confederation of free minds, Reshtak agreed. With humanity as the guardians of mental freedom throughout the galaxy. The formal documents were prepared without any telepathic ceremonies, of course. Instead, they were signed using old-fashioned written contracts that each species could understand. As Minho put his signature on the historic agreement, Dr. Park reflected on how strange life could be. Just a week ago, humans had felt alone in the universe. Now they were the most important species in galactic history, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because their minds worked in ways that made them impossible to control. Their chaotic, contradictory, beautiful human thoughts would keep freedom alive among the stars. They would never be alone again.